As we get into this, we're going to look at verses 8 through 11. I will tell you this, you guys, who I print that for. My introduction still pretty much stays the same for the Ten Commandments as we go through the Ten Commandments. So if you start reading that, you go, well, Ron gave this to me last time. Is he going over the same lesson again? The introduction is the introduction. That doesn't change much until you get to where it says the last several weeks we looked at. And it says, we looked at a couple weeks ago, we shall have no other gods before me. And then we shall not make any graven images. And then last 2 weeks we went over, shall not take the Lord's name in vain. But everything else in the introduction is the same. If I add something, I'll let you know and it'll be at the end. But the introduction is the same, so I won't go over that introduction again, but I always like to have an introduction in there. So when y'all read that, know, and then when you get to point 1 is where we'll start the lesson for today, if that makes sense. Which is on page 2. I got the little numbers up top. So, but as we have gone over these the last couple of weeks, those are what we've looked at. And I hated that I didn't get into more detail, but I think it was how the Lord worked it out. I like spending that last 2 weeks on shall not take the Lord's name in vain. Because it's not always, as people would say, and I hate using this way, but people say, well, taking the Lord's name in vain is using the GD word. No, there's a lot more in taking the Lord's name in vain. It's the words we use and how we say it. I think Chan was telling me, and Heather's probably told me too, but I know you two like watching that Trent Tribe thing. I don't remember you ever telling me, but Chan said that over there. That's what he, no, I know you like Trent Tribe, but I don't remember you ever telling me that he used this as an example, that he went through the Ten Commandments and he kind of said the same thing. But, so I found that was kind of interesting. But as we get into this next verse, I've got some stuff I'd like to talk about on this. But it says this: remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shall thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gate. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. So what we're going to talk about today is one point. Hopefully I'll get through it all, but if not, it'll be a 2-week lesson, and I apologize. It may work out better for me that way, but getting ready for a sermon, but it doesn't matter. But as we look at this, it's just one point that we're going to look at with 5 pages worth in it, Miss Holly. But remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And again, that's verses 8 to 11. When I say Sabbath day, what do y'all think of? Sunday. Do you know that's wrong? Do you know what day the actually Sabbath is? Saturday. For the Jewish people, the Sabbath was Saturday. For us, the reason why we worship on Sunday is why. Can anybody tell me? That was the day Jesus rose from the grave. It was the beginning of the week, was the day they started seeing Jesus. If I'm getting that right. Let me see if I've got it still on my phone.
If it ain't, it sounds good.
Yeah. Christians primarily worship on Sunday to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ, which occurred the first day of the week. That's why we are here. But we should worship Him every day. And we do. Or I hope we do. But the Sabbath day was to keep it holy. It was a day of rest. The seventh day was to be a day of rest and worship for all that traveled with Israel. So I wrote a list down on that. It was for the husbands and wives. It was for I don't have it down there, but it was for the single men and single women, those that weren't married yet. But it was for the husbands and wives. This was to be a day of rest. This was to be a day of worship. It was for that husband and that wife to rest. It was for sons and daughters. It was for strangers. Who were the strangers? Who would be considered the strangers? Do you guys remember? Those who chose to travel on that journey that left with them. Because if you remember, when they left Egypt, there were some Egyptians that left with them. There were some Egyptians that saw the hand of God as he moved through with those plagues, and he moved through, and they said, we want in on this. And they left with the Egyptians. It was to be for the cattle. Their cattle were supposed to rest. I don't know how you make a cow worship, but we'll go with it. But the cattle was not to be going out and tilling the ground or whatever they used for cattle. The cattle were supposed to rest. It was for the servants and the slaves. And I put those together because, as we learned a couple of weeks ago, servant and slave are the same thing. The word servant means slave. So servants and slaves, and that was male and female, were to rest on this day. So on the Sabbath day was a day of rest and a day of worship. It was a day to take it easy. That would be hard this day and age, right? Because nobody likes to rest. Nobody likes to take it easy. Nobody likes to sit. You live with my wife, she's always got to be doing something. She would have been struck dead on the Sabbath day if we were Israelites journeying through it, because she would have to be doing something. And I don't mean that ugly toward her, but my wife cannot sit still. I'm not knocking her. That's her. The only reason she knows she can't go out and play in her garden on Sunday is because when she went out there to play in her garden either last year or the year before, as she was out there, she looked up in a tree, and guess what she saw? A danger noodle. Exactly. I can't use the word snake because that's trigger word for her. Came in flipping out because she saw this in the tree, and she said, I cannot work anymore in this.
And it was 3
I don't know why
Sundays
she was trying to pit that word that triggers her, but she was, Miss Brenda. I don't know why. But they were all to rest from all their work. So what kind of work was it they were supposed to rest from? And I wrote some things down. They were supposed to rest from in the fields. Now here they are, they're traveling, but take it, the Sabbath is going to go on past when they settle in. So they were not to go out and do any gardening. They were not to go out and do any yard work. They were not to go out and put new hoofs on their horses or their camels or their cows or whatever they put. They were not to go out in the field and do any work. They were not to go out and pick tomatoes. They were not to go out and pick peas. They were not to go out and they were to rest. They were not to go out and pick up any manna, but guess what? No manna would be falling on that day. They were not to do any work in their home. They were not to be doing the dishes, doing the clothes. They were not to be doing any, I think I've got it down here later on, so I'm not going to say that. But any housework was not to be done. It would be a day of no traveling. They were not to travel. It would be a day of no cooking. Meals were prepared the day before. If you remember when the manna fell, because I don't think I have this in here. But when the manna and the quail, as God provided manna and quail for them, He said on that, I guess it would have been that Friday, gather up enough on the 6th day that you would have enough for the 7th day. And if you remember, if they did that during the week, if they did that on the 3rd day to have a little bit more for that morning on the 4th day, because they might not want to get up and go out there, what would happen to that food? It would ruin. It would, as it said, stank. It would stink, but it would also have worms in it. That's protein, but you know, I mean. But on the 6th day, they would gather enough and they would prepare it that day. Because there was no cooking. So you would, and I think I do have this in here somewhere. If I do, we'll go there then. They would boil, and they would, which was that word, it says seethe in there, but that's another word for boil. Or they would cook it the next day to be prepared for the 7th day, the day of rest and the day of worship. It would be a day of, and I put this in here because as I was thinking of it, and I think I read it somewhere, it would be a day of no bathing or clothes washing. Again, this would be done the day before. Now that would be hard for me because I take a shower in the morning, and when I worked, I took a shower when I got home. That's just my thing. I know some people get up in the morning and go. Not me. I got to get sleep off of me. I got to shower. I don't sleep in the dirt or the mud, but I got to shower when I get up. That's just me. But all that it was a day of rest. That was considered work. But you do work to get yourself clean. So I mean, work, throw a shoulder out. You work to get yourself clean, don't you, Miss Hall? So that again would be done the day before. It would be a day of no playing or sports. I tried to think of us. So you wouldn't go, okay, well, I need some peace and quiet in the house. Kids, y'all go out and play. Or you wouldn't be running down to see the Braves play or the Falcons play on Sunday because games are always played on the weekends. It was a day of, it would be peace and quiet. You might hear a cow or a horse go, ee, or whatever. But it would be quiet. Would they, yes.
Did they sit around and pray to God, or did they sit there and just do nothing?
I think they worshiped. I think they were allowed to move in the house, normal stuff. You had to get up and go pee. Now, Pharisees and Sadducees might have considered that work, but it was a day you had to be mindful to rest. It was a day you had to be mindful to worship. It was a day that, yeah, you wasn't doing any work, but you got up and walked around in the house from one room to the other. Their houses were like one big old thing. I think everything was together. So I'm thinking of you were in the living room, you got up and you went into but it was a day that you took a day, you relaxed, you rested, you gained your energy back to get ready for the next day. But it was also a day of worship. Does that make sense, Scott?
Yeah, I was just curious. I mean, so kind of like
Yeah,
sit
well, I
on
was
the
trying-
front porch and after church or something like that, just relaxing right there.
It would be a day of no sexual activity. There would be no bow, chicky, wow, wow that day. That takes work, so there would be none of that. And we're not going to go any further than that. Again, the Sabbath was a day of rest and worship. Of rest and worship. And like I said, the Sadducees and the Pharisees came up with many, many, many rules outside of it. But this was to be a day that you ceased from working and you rested and you worshiped God. Yeah.
So let me ask you this: the Sadducees and the Pharisees, all these right here is, I know that the Lord said to keep it holy. You know,
right?
Are they the ones that came up with all of this, not to do this, or did the Lord?
As you remember, the Lord, as these 10 commandments are being spoken to the children of Israel, it's not Moses telling them. They're still listening to him talk on the mountains. I know we've been in this spot for a minute. But this is where they hear their voice, hear his voice, because as we go on later in this chapter, they go, hey, Moses, we don't want to hear you. I mean, we don't want to hear the Lord. That scares us. We want to hear you. Let the Lord tell you and we'll listen. And that's to the point that God said, I will make it where they understand to listen to you, that what I'm saying that comes through you is coming from me. It scared them to hear the Lord say this. It's kind of like the preacher can get up and really speak to you, and you know the Lord's speaking to you, but you go out and But if you were to visibly, audibly, not visibly, hear the Lord tell you that, it would scare the snikes out of you. And you would listen and you would trust and obey. Where if a Sunday school teacher spoke God's word and saying this is how we're supposed to live, and you'd sit there and go, okay, yeah, I see that in the Bible. But if the Lord audibly spoke to you on that, you'd be like, okay. Does that make sense? So at this time, the religious, as time goes on and there's Pharisees and Sadducees, the religious, they will add more. I think there were thousands of laws that they threw on top of these 10 commandments. Because these 10 commandments just are simple, cut and dry. You know, so, because when we think of rest, we're like, okay, well, I'll sit down for a minute and go do this. He was wanting you to take a break. And I think the point of rest is when you're resting, you get to a point that you take time to worship God. You take time to hear God. I'm not saying you don't, because I know He has spoken to me before, but when you're in a rush and you're busy and you're going and you're milking the cows and you're now, let's go to work. You're ordering parts for that school bus. You're over here slinging Red Bulls. You're making sure this is done. You're focused. But at a time that you're keeping the Sabbath, and that was a time to worship God, you're resting. There'll be tons of people in here today that are thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow. What's going to happen at work? What's traffic going to be like? What's going to happen here? How are my patients going to act? How are the customers that I'm dealing with going to act? How's this? How's that? See, patients work good for y'all because you and Heather deal with patients. And I could see that in my life. What's tomorrow going to be like? Okay, I know I've got, as a boss, I was like, okay, I've got 6 guys. Who's going to call in? Who's going to do this? As a driver, I was like, okay, I know I've got 10 stops today, or do I really got 11 because this is that every other Monday, or do I really got 12 because this is that one that's that once a month store that I've got to do. And oh gosh, tomorrow I've got to go deal with Habib, and Habib is just a jerk because he thinks his one case of Red Bull store is like a Quick Trip that sells 50 cases, and I've got to deal with him wanting 20 cases instead of one. And I've got to go back and forth with him. So a lot of times when we're in here, we're thinking about that, or where we're going to eat, or what we got to do when we get home. And really, we should be in here. Now, like I said, we don't follow the Sabbath. But we have to rest and worship, and that's in here. Unfortunately, this is going to be a 2-week lesson. I'm sorry, Scott.
Did the Jews still follow the Sabbath?
The Jews do.
Or the...
Yeah, the Jews, yes. They would still follow the Sabbath. Saturday would probably be a day of no work. I know they do, but does all of Israel go silent or not? I don't know. I can look into that and see. But technically, the Jewish ones that don't follow Jesus Christ as this, and they follow the traditional what from the Bible, yes. Because they still follow all those, the Passover, which I mean we do too. That's it. But all the different festivals. You got what I'm saying? Yeah. Devout Jews. I don't remember what that title was called. Siddiq. I don't think it's the Siddiq, but it's something like that. But because the Siddiq's like with acid, right? But Semitic. I don't know. But again, the Sabbath would be a day of rest and worship, and we'll get this question in and we'll stop here because I know I'm trying to get Heather to get over there to get guys who are coming in. You were considered father because you helped her with Charlie when Charlie would come over. You got what I'm saying? So as I told you, Miss Holly, I didn't forget that. So here's my question to you. How hard would it be for you to follow the Sabbath of just resting and worshiping? How hard would that be for you? Now, I know some in this room who probably won't talk, they would say it would be very hard. Because guess what? We can go home and do dishes and do the clothes if we need to. We can go home and do that. But if we were following the Sabbath as I just read, in your lifestyle now, how hard would that be for you to do it? It would be hard. We grow up in a culture that's go, 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 go. I was thankful for a job, and I know, Holly, you're the same way. Heather's the same way, because as long as I've known Scott, I don't know with the school, but I'm imagining, I was thankful for a job that it was 2 days off. But they were going 6 days, and then Sunday was rest. If that was this day and age in America, well, who's going to cut my grass? This needs done. This needs done. Now Heather's over there saying, "Well, I cut the grass now." I get that.
Mean wife.
Huh?
Mean wife.
Yeah. She said, "Oh, I'm going to cut the grass, brother." I'm just kidding. But it would be hard for us. Because when we're done with church, we're like, well, now I'm going to the Braves game. I'm going to the mall. I'm going to do this. Now, that may not fit any of us in here. I know that. But most people, I'm going golfing today. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to the lake now. And instead of resting and worshiping, it would be very hard. Because guess what? It's hard for us to make time to even come to church. It's hard for us to make time. Now, I'm going to say it this way. Other preachers may disagree with me on this. You have vacations. I get that. I get that. You got a vacation, you leave Saturday, and you come back Saturday, so you miss that Sunday. You and Scott, you and Scott, let me get that. Y'all went on vacation? You got a vacation. It would have been all right for me and Heather if we'd have stayed. Us going to the mountains, I'd rather be back here for Sunday. But if we go to Kiowa Island in South Carolina, or we go somewhere in Florida, we go to Disney World, and we miss a Sunday, that's okay. That's okay. Here's my problem. If every other weekend you're going off and you're missing Sunday, your lifestyle tells you, your lifestyle will tell on you who you really are. If you're gone every Sunday, and I'm not talking about health either, okay, Miss Brenda, because I know health can play a factor in it. But I'm going to use health on the reverse side of this too when I say this. How you live your life shows who you really are. There are some people in here that have health problems, and they can't get here. But there are some people that go to churches. So now I'm speaking general, okay? I'm not speaking about our church. All this is general. If it applies to our church, then it applies. Put that stamp on it. But I'm talking about general. We will wear ourselves out on Saturday that we're too tired to come Sunday. We will go off every other weekend. We will buy a season pass to go to every game and justify that I am worshiping the Lord at a baseball, a football, a golf game, or whatever you can buy a season pass for. We will tell everybody that I can worship God in a boat. I can worship God in a deer stand. We will use a sniffle to keep it. If you got something that you can pass on to somebody else, or it's just knocked you out where you're weak and you can't come, but you're at home and you're like, I've got the sniffles, but I feel okay. But I'm going to stay home today because I've got the sniffles. We will use excuses, or we wear ourselves out, or we stay out so late on a Saturday night. It generally tells me you're in a place you didn't need to be at if you get home at 1 o'clock in the morning. You were doing something you probably should have been if you get home at 1 o'clock in the morning. Don't cut that off, Heather, because it's facts. That you're too tired to come in and worship the Lord. Now, sometimes that may make somebody mad, but here's what it tells me. If you can't make it to Sunday, through that week, you probably wouldn't end this. Coming to church doesn't make you saved. But God tells us we need to worship with fellow believers. We need to come and worship with. You should have a desire to want to come and fellowship with like-minded believers in Jesus Christ.
It also is who your Lord is too when you're out on Saturday nights or be it all day or whatever.
Now, if you can go out on a Saturday night, and you can go, and I'm not saying hang out in the bars. You ain't gonna never hear me say that. Or the clubs, or whatever that is. But if you can go out and y'all go watch I'm gonna use you two for example. Y'all go out and y'all go watch a 2 o'clock, you go out and go to a 10:30 movie. Y'all are out there watching Toy Story number 5. And it goes to 1 o'clock in the morning. And y'all wake up the next morning and go, man, I'm just too tired to go to church. But if you can do that and get up the next morning and come, I don't look at that as evil. And I'm not saying it's evil, okay? But I'm saying some of us come home and we've got a hangover and we've got this, and I'm different than a lot of people. I don't think you should drink. I won't go round and rounds on that. If that's what you think, that's fine, but I think you're wrong. You can take it up with God. But I think having a beer, you don't know having that beer is going to make you an alcoholic. Now, you might say, well, I'm drunk and I know I'm not. But then again, I'm going to say this. You don't know you drinking that beer and another Christian come into that place where you're at drinking a beer at Chili's goes, well, you know what? Brother Ryan's in here drinking a beer, and I always just thought we should abstain from that. And he starts drinking and he becomes an alcoholic. You got as much on that guilt as he did for trying it, because he should have had some common sense. That's me. That's me. And a lot of people disagree with me on that, and that's fine. But that's where I stand. But it would be hard for us in this day and age to do this. That's why we're under the covenant of grace. So we'll pick up and we'll hit the rest of that next week.